there is absolute magic that happens when you can create that peer network for your customers. Literally, people buy from people. Invariably, you will get business out of that because your customers are sharing who they trust, and that's you.
Welcome to It Comes Down to This. Today's guest is Randi-Sue Deckard, a leadership and talent strategist who helps companies hire, develop, and retain the kind of people that fuel long-term success. I've invited Randi-Sue on the show because she brings a rare blend of clarity and compassion to the conversation around people. Whether it's aligning your team with your mission, making tough hiring calls, or navigating growth with intention. In this episode, we talk about how to build a culture that attracts the right talent, how founders can develop the leadership skills their company needs, and why clarity in your values is a non-negotiable if you want to scale without losing your soul. In today's episode, it comes down to this: your people strategy is your business strategy. Welcome back to The Marketer, everybody. It is great to have you on the show once again. We have a fantastic program for you today with a fantastic guest. I have Randi Deckard with me, and today we are going to be talking about three main areas on the show that you're going to be interested in. The first is mentorship and coaching, why that's important regardless of where you're at in your career. The second is how you thrive in down markets. As everybody knows, we're facing one of those currently. Who knows for how long? So how do we thrive when things get rough? And this third thing that we're going to talk about, which I'm super excited about, is community building and how you build communities and why it's important, especially in down markets. So the title of our show today is Building Strong Communities When Times Get Tough. So Randi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Monte. I'm a fantastic guest and ready to go.
Awesome. Super excited about it. Well, I'm going to jump right into it, Randi, and I want to ask you, how has mentorship shaped your career? And can you share with us a story about a mentor who has made an impact on your life and in your career?
Sure. So, there's more than one, but there's two that I really are pivotal to my story. Mentorship is just super important. If you don't know how to get where you're dreaming of going or thinking of going, a mentor can really help you, because typically the way I see a mentor, it's someone who's at where you want to be, and they can help you kind of lay down the steps, right, of how you might get there. A mentor might also be someone who sees something in you, believes in you before you believe in yourself. So those are two ways that I look at mentor. And of course, a coach is really someone that can help you through all the steps. So to go back to the two people that I mentioned in the beginning, one was Jessica Landestrate. She believed in me. I literally transitioned from being a clinical lab scientist to an individual contributor account manager at a startup. And when I interviewed with her, she's like, the role that you came in to interview, I don't see you for that. This is what I see you doing, and you could be really good at it. She gave me my shot at the commercial side of healthcare. And throughout my 6 years at that startup, I went from individual contributor to director of commercial operations before I exited right before Quest purchased us. We're still friends today, still keep in touch. And I think that's the beauty of a mentor. I mean, they don't just help you once, they're there for life. The other person that helped me was a former COO, because he saw in me before I believed it as well. See the theme here? Of, what, you're extremely adaptable and you can do anything. So he gave me my superpower. I didn't realize that one of my strengths was in the GTM realm. I have held every single role that is possible except marketing, even though I oversee marketing, because of that. I just extremely curious, and he really inspired and put that belief and fire in me that, that was a gift. And I just hadn't seen it for myself, the whole forest for the trees conversation that you can have. So the stories we tell ourselves. And so I just think it's really important that you find people who have either been where you want to go or who find something in you or see something in you that you don't believe yourself. And it can be better than you actually imagined. Because 15 years ago, if you had asked me if this is where I'd be, I'd have told you no. I would have been a forensic pathologist.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that definitely shows the impact that a mentor can have on your life. That's 100%. For sure. And I resonate with that very much. I think that it's critically important to have somebody who you give the freedom, if you would, to speak into your life and to be honest and truthful about it. I've had my own share of experiences with mentors over time. They don't always come the way in the shape, if you would, that you think they are, do they? It's not necessarily an assigned engagement, if you would. There can be quite a few people who sometimes they just come alongside you, put their arm around you and say, hey, let me talk into your life about something. And if you're open to that, amazing things can happen. It can change the trajectory, if you would, of your life and just be extremely valuable. Why do you believe that everyone, CEOs, leadership, anybody that's just starting out actually needs a coach? And how do you go about finding the right one?
Right. So I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier and the forest for the trees. You need a coach. And, I don't care who you are, whether you're CEO, SDR, you need someone to be able to be radically candid with you and help you see the things that you might have bias around, be an accountability partner and stretch you. Some people, not everyone, but some people will hang out in the comfortable. And growth happens in the uncomfortable. And, a coach can really help push you or help you talk through and realize maybe why you're resisting. I think when you're looking for a coach specifically, you need to find someone that you trust. So there has to be rapport. And I also believe that your coach may change as you proceed. Like someone who helped you early in your career might not be able to help you as you get older, right? I say older, like more mature in your profession. That may change. And I always say that you have to invest and bet on yourself. And the way to do that is through a coach. A coach can really help you, excuse the expression, broken record, but the forest for the trees. Because I think sometimes we tell ourselves stories and a coach is a really good accountability partner and holds up that mirror. Maybe when you are like, I don't want to hold up that mirror. Let me shine it somewhere else.
It's totally the truth. Totally the truth. We all have blind spots.
Yes.
And they're called blind spots for a reason. We don't see them. Mm-hmm. And often it takes somebody that has been there, done that can come in and see what you're doing to help move you in the right direction.
Yep.
And, sometimes, and it doesn't really matter in your career or where you're at in the stage of your career, in my opinion. Obviously, definitely important when you're new, especially in sales, anything really, but sales, you can't go to college and get a sales degree.
100%. But there's no excuse nowadays when I look around at all the resources outside of paying for a coach.
Totally.
They're, LinkedIn, YouTube, there are just, you go to conferences, because some of the conferences are virtual, right? And there's a free ticket. I'm just saying there's so many free resources outside of,
without question.
Without necessarily paying for it. I always say though, just be careful who you are consuming or listening to.
Yeah.
Do they have authority? Do they know what they're talking about? Vet that first. So that's just one thing to be, I think, careful about. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can have more than one coach. You might have a coach that you pay, but there might be someone who just cares about you and, you know, coaches you and shares. And
Yeah.
once again, it's up to you how you take that feedback. But being self-aware is huge, right?
Without
Knowing
question.
knowing where your weaknesses are and where you can shore up, and then, the other areas, where you're strong, and maybe it's just other people's opinion.
Yeah, and I'd love to piggyback on that because I agree with you. The number of sales resources that you can find online in the library, everything are unlimited.
Yep.
You can learn about process, you can learn about structure, you can learn about CRMs, anything you want in sales, right? To become a better salesperson with all those processes and tools and so on and so forth.
Right.
Where coaching and mentorship comes in, though, is a focus specifically on you.
Yes. And
And
knowing
how do
where to
you
start.
exactly? And how do you apply those systems and
Mhm.
processes and tools and techniques and everything else to your own process? And I've talked to a lot of salespeople, and so many of them they grew up in sales by having the owner or the sales leader in the company, kind of take them out on the call, do
Mhm.
the call on a Zoom or whatever with them, and they get to help them overcome the different hurdles and stuff that are just natural. That based on your personality type and learning personalities of people that you're talking to, how you overcome these different barriers for sales. So definitely getting that personal touch is so important.
And I think, if I can just tease that out a little bit, I think it's really, crucial, from a coaching perspective, that individuality, like, everyone's at a different place. And just like in sales, we meet our customers where they're at. From a coaching perspective, in order to grow, you need to meet yourself where you're at and know where you need to improve. Some people, aren't so good in the disco, or aren't so good in getting the meeting, or they can get all that done and then they just like crumble, when it goes to close, right? They struggle with negotiation, handling objections. Um, and so, like I said, just being, candid and understanding those. And that's where, I think some people maybe shy away from their metrics. And I think, really understanding your personal metrics, are will tell you where to go. But then also as a leader, that's how I know individually how I need to help people. And from a compound perspective, if you focus on those areas, you will receive a compound effect individually and as a team. If you can address the personal challenges that, someone is having, and customize their coaching.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked now a little bit about why you need a coach, always learning, kind of, how you keep your skills up to par, if you would. And I kind of have a flow for this show that I went through. That leads us into now our discussion around what happens in down markets,
Mhm.
right? And this is another reason why coaching is so important, because if you're new in sales or young in your career, you know, things tighten up in down markets. Sales cycles stretch, and it gets harder, not only to grow your funnel but working people through that funnel and getting to the close. So when the economy gets tough, Randy, what's the first thing you focus on in your business strategy?
Yeah, in our business strategy, especially coming out of COVID and, the last, let's be honest, the last few years, the first place we went to is our customers. Customers leave clues, right? So There's that post expansion opportunity. There's who would be a referral, leveraging your network, and especially for those customers who've articulated value. And I will stress that you don't have to necessarily have your sellers, I'm going to use the word harassing your customers, but this is where, having collaboration between CS and sales is super important, and really using the tools that you have. Most organizations are using some type of recording, so either sales could listen into calls and see how customers are articulating value, leveraging that in their messaging. CS folks can help identify people who are champions and would be a referral, and help them leverage, and working together saying, these are the 5 accounts or 5 people that I'm trying to reach. Can we ask them, because you have the relationship, if they're willing to make an introduction on behalf of the organization, and working together. And one of the things I've done is not divide my team. So I'm over sales, marketing, customer success, and we have joint meetings with all 3 pieces of the organization, the revenue engine. And I've purposely done that because, we align on the metric, but it's the day-to-day collaboration that makes the revenue happen. So that's just the way I like to think of it. And then the other thing is with marketing, thinking about how you can generate peer-to-peer community interaction. So I talk a lot about building community without walls, right? You don't have to have a platform per se, but it can be through thought leadership, virtual webinars, micro events. And that's where you can have a certain ratio of customers with a certain ratio of prospective buyers. But there is absolute magic that happens when you can create that peer network for your customers. Sit back, facilitate, and literally people buy from people. Invariably, you will get business out of that because your customers are sharing who they trust, and that's you in the equation.
Yeah, totally. I love what you said about combining your teams. So often in businesses, marketing, sales are kind of independent silos. They don't communicate a lot together. They argue, if you would, over how many leads, quality of leads, whether or not they're even leads. You can't close. I mean, there's always these internal debates between the 2 departments. Yet they are, Wonder Twin powers, right? I mean, the old cartoons, if you remember those, I don't know if you're old enough for those days like I am, but remember the old Wonder Twin powers where they would
Yes.
put their rings together and then all of a sudden they become a superhero.
Yep. Here we go. We're going to activate.
That's right.
I have 2 rings. I can do it myself.
Super marketing. Yes.
Yeah.
So, being for the 2 teams to be able to come together and understand, okay, what does the potential customer actually need? Where are they at in the sales journey, and what's your role, and how you're going to push them through that journey, and what's my role, and how am I going to assist in that? What's the number of touches that it takes? What do they need? All those things are so vitally important when it comes to marketing and sales. And that's why on this season of The Marketer, I've chosen to bring in more of the sales component, because listener feedback is, hey, that's only one side of the equation. That's this silo. We still need, the sales silo, if you would, to combine into it. So, we're coming up on an election. This is, if you're listening to this, while at the time of recording, the national elections are coming up. Economies are down, as they're unstable. Let's say they're unstable at, inflation's up, so to speak. So it is true that businesses, just like people individually in their families and homes, are concerned about the economy and are probably at this time of year starting to cinch up those pocketbooks, if you would. Right. So in while working with your marketing and your sales teams, does that have any factor on their approach to the market? Do you guys shift your strategy throughout the year to accommodate these different things? Or is it kind of set it and forget it, just kind of push through?
Oh, I love this conversation. So, first off, strategy is, always done on an annual basis, but quarterly, we review. So, what's going well, what isn't, and what happens out of that is, okay, we had a hypothesis. Former scientist here. We're gonna, use that word, and we experimented, and did we like the outcome? And from that, we're always looking at data and context, and the context is kind of what you talked about. The political political environment, the election, the economy's down, and then of course additional context is, depending on the market you're in, some sectors have been hit harder than others, right? So there's that data and then what I call the context. So I want to look at the whole ecosystem a quarter by quarter, and we decide what we're going to double down on. We decide what we're going to let go of. And is there something that's a little interesting? Should we try? And then is there something that we're seeing results? We're going to let it go a little longer and evaluate. And it's an iterative process. So, even though we set this, it's not set.
Yeah.
It's continually being iterated, right?
Yes.
And if there was ever something that was so blatant that, oh, we need to chop this now or stop this now, we would do that, right? So I just feel that you always have to give things enough time, and that's why we review quarterly. And sometimes things we let go longer than a quarter because we evaluate and we say, we don't have enough data. It looks like we're moving in the right direction. Let's give this a little bit longer. And that's also how I manage up when I, talk to executive and board. That's how I share is like, these are all the things that we're doing. This is what we let go of and why it didn't work out the way we expected. But this is how we're pivoting, whether it's double down and this is what we're extending. And this is what what you expect to see next quarter. So they know exactly where we're headed and why we've made the decisions we've made. And we do that as a team because, um, you know, my team is closer to the customer than I am all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yes, as a leader, I do make time to talk to customers, but they're in it like the details and the weeds, right? And so I rely on them, but we look at data and context continually. And that's my job, is to help pull that all together when we have those conversations.
What are the key performance indicators that you track besides closes? What are the main things that you're looking at to make those decisions?
Sure. So it's not just, closed, what closed lost. It's things like your actual contract value. It's, is there a way to increase that? And have we increased that? Why haven't we increased that? It's like, is it because our customers aren't understanding the value? Is it the messaging that, we haven't been able to increase our contract size? The other thing that we're continually looking at is customer lifetime value. And the reason that I use that is like, are we targeting the right customer? Now, the current company that I'm at, we're fairly mature. So we have our ICP pretty locked down. But I share that because depending on the stage of your company and where you're at, you may need to look at that. And because a bad customer can cost you money, time, and resources that you don't have, which is super,
without question,
which is, like I said, in a down, you just can't do that. And then the other thing that we the other KPI that I like to look at is, the cost of an action, how much closed lost and why, and looking at those deals specifically, because typically what I've found when we look at that, that's another opportunity to coach the team as a whole, but also individually, because discovery never stops, and you have to continually qualify. And sometimes, as crazy as it may sound, one of the things that I've learned as a leader is, communication is important, but so is repetition. And so
Oh,
always
yes.
revisiting foundation skills, as well as building, right? So that's my opportunity looking at that closed losses. That's why my way to revisit foundational skills. And then how much percentage is coming from referrals? How much is coming from partnerships? How can we, increase those? What did our community events look like? What was the traction from those? Um, so it's a host of things, and like I said, I think everyone's industry is a little bit different, but I
Sure.
think there's certain KPIs that everyone would agree, you want to look at a quarterly basis.
I think lifetime value is an extremely KPI to look at, and I'm fascinated that how many companies that we will work with that really don't even understand how to calculate their lifetime value.
Right.
So very critical. As you're talking, and in this segment of the show, um, tracking all those key performance indicators, quarterly making adjustments, had to lead to a time when you had to make a difficult decision. Um,
So,
Walk me
yeah.
through a story of that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think, anyone who's been in leadership has maybe had to come to the realization that, you know, the business unit economics, meant that there needed to be a change, on the team. And so when I was at the startup that I mentioned, I had to look at my team, and do a riff because we as an organization expanded too quickly, and I think that's what some companies have experienced over the last 18 months, 2 years, is that there was this growth at all costs, and there was a lot of money, and now they've had to be more efficient, bootstrapped, and you have to do more with less. And if you overhired in the wrong area, you just don't have the funds to support them, right? So you
Yeah,
have to make some hard decisions. You still need to service your customers. You still need to get new customers. So it's hard, especially when you're part of the team that retains customers and is also generating new revenue for the organization, to make a decision like that. It's really tough.
yeah.
Um, and I never want to be in that position again.
It's no fun.
Uh, it is
It's
no
never
fun.
fun.
It is no fun because we're human, and you're impacting people's lives when this happens. And I don't take that lightly, as a leader. But I think sometimes, even with all the strategic planning we doing and all the context things we look at, the industry, the political climate, whatever the case may be, of all those different contexts that you need to look at for your business, sometimes you make a mistake. And
Sure.
I'm a huge proponent of, what did I learn from this, and how can I ensure that it doesn't happen again? And in that instance, it was, asking better questions and maybe challenging, should we be hiring all these people right now, with XYZ? And so that was my lesson that I took away from that. So I've always been very judicious since, on the size of my team, making sure that, they're obviously not overwhelmed, but I'm getting maximum, because I just don't want to have to go through that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is, business is business, and we can do
Hmm.
all the SWOT analysis that we want. Sometimes, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Sometimes you just can't factor everything in.
100%. And
And
I'm in healthcare, and like this year, the last 12 months, cybersecurity has rocked the healthcare world.
Oh,
And of
yes.
course, I don't not just healthcare, but then I think about like the CrowdStrike incident, like how many people were impacted in businesses and how much revenue was lost as a result of
Yeah.
you know, a single change that as a company, it's kind of out of your control, right? But
Yeah.
you're left holding the bag for that.
Well, and data breaches
Mhm.
are just increasing. I mean, just this week there was the news of, like, I don't know, it was a massive amount of data, user data, that had been breached from somewhere, and I can't remember if it's healthcare. I want to say it was, but full name, their social security numbers, all the stuff was now just kind of released out into the wild. And I can imagine, how challenging it is in your role and in the health industry when something like that happens.
Yeah, any
Um,
industry that's regulated, whether it's
oh,
healthcare,
yeah,
fintech, et cetera, there are a number of areas that are heavily regulated, but yeah, it can be devastating. It can wipe out a company. I think
absolutely.
Change Healthcare with their cybersecurity incident. Um, I want to say it was like 23, like it was a quarter, like 23-25% of their revenue for the year would be impacted by that. Never mind all the other companies, all the other healthcare companies they impacted, but theirs alone. It's billions of dollars. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And I can share my own story of difficult decisions. It doesn't have anything to do with data breaches, but things that you can't control. My company specifically helped people um, maximize LinkedIn, if you would, use it for both marketing and lead generation. And we, in 2022, the early part of the year, LinkedIn had gone through so many changes.
The algo.
Well, the algorithm changes, but also how people use the platform,
Mhm.
because there's so much spam and so many fake accounts and stuff that had, landed on the platform. Um, Direct messaging and getting people to talk through a direct messaging standpoint just dropped down to like cold calls. Nobody was, responding in their direct messaging, and it really didn't matter what you put in there. People were just done with it. Gone were the days of the meet and greet where you could just connect with somebody and say, "Hey, would you like to jump on a quick call and meet each other?" People were tired of that. So that led to a very difficult decision for us as a business to move actually completely away from those services, knowing that you can't live and die, if you would, off of one service. It also meant we had to let go of a large share of our team. So again, those types of things can happen, and they're not expected. You hope they never do, but they just do. And so that leads us into our last section of this podcast, Randy, where we talk about community. And why is it so important to build communities within your business, right? So you've done some impressive work building communities at Pavilion. So what's the secret to keeping people engaged and involved?
So I look at community as no different than sales, in the sense that one, you meet folks where they're at. So in sales, you meet customers where they're at, and then you add value. I have this saying that, I never ask for anything unless I have bank. And what I mean by that is I have to have, given value to you. And so if I don't have $1 million worth of value with you, Monte, I'm not going to ask for anything. So it's a give more than take mentality. And
Nice.
I've been very, fortunate throughout my career to be able to build, peer to peer communities, community without walls, in my business roles, and then just from a professional perspective, like with Pavilion being the DFW chair in Dallas, just once again, it's really critical to meet people where they're at and help people choose their own adventure, right? So,
Yeah.
as a member, or of part of the community, whether it's a pavilion or someone at Bessler in my community without walls, it's like, what's important to you right now? What are you trying to accomplish? And so if I can meet you where you're at, I can help you. Maybe, it's education. Okay. Well, here's the different things that we have. What is your most urgent need? Right. And this is also what we do in business, right? It's like you're
True.
looking to find out and help people. So I think sometimes people overthink. Well, I just don't think. I know people overthink this and overcomplicate it. But it's really about adding value and meeting people where they're at. And sometimes you just have to ask,
Yeah.
how can I help you? What would be the most beneficial thing right now to you? Is it education? Is it, meeting someone else because you have a problem and you want to talk to a peer? Can I connect you? What is it?
Yeah.
And that's it. I know it's a process, it's a framework, but it really is that simple.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, we definitely don't have to overcomplicate it. What are the different barriers, though, that you have found? Every sales call, every step of the way in sales ha- comes with a barrier. What are the barriers in terms of getting people involved in a community and then keeping them involved?
So it's access, right? So first off, they have to trust you. So if you don't have credibility, you are not going to have access to those people. So the first barrier always is access. And even if someone maybe steps in, if whatever they see in that moment, if it isn't adding value for them, they might step out and never come back. And I always equivalate that to, if you have a bad experience at a restaurant, you might not never go back again, right? So you have to focus on the experience and be very intentional about when you invite people in for the first time, what their experience is going to be. So if you understand why they're joining, like, you can maybe direct them to the right point to join as well, right? So they have the best experience. And once again, that comes down to being curious and asking those questions. But um, you know, same thing in sales, same thing in community. It's leveraging peers, to connect others. And once you have that trust, people want to come in because, oh, so and so's in that. I trust them. Like, what value are they getting? And if they talk about that, that's how you get people to come in, right? It really is about building buzz, and the way you do that is by being authentic and adding value, way more value than you ever asked for, whether it's because you want business or whatever, you need something for yourself. It's always about building bank.
Yeah, well said. And one transactional conversation before building that bank is the same as making a withdrawal when there's no money in it.
100%. And it's a build up, right? So
Yeah.
that's such a great point. I always talk about with my team, um, you know, uh, planting seeds, right? And nurturing relationships. Um, you know, you know or you get a sense of when someone is ready through the conversations that you have. But if you haven't earned the right to that access yet, you're 100% correct. It is transactional, and you are nothing but an irritant because you are adding no value.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You are an irritant, and
Yes.
what people do with an irritant is try and get away from it. So
100%. And the thing is, you can damage permanently depending
that's
how
true.
you act, right? And so I think it's just something we need to be cognizant of. And I truly believe that, if you have the right intention and you truly are adding value over time, you can build. Is it the fastest way? Not initially, but once you have enough people in your community, you definitely can get more business much more rapidly. But it is one of those things, it does take an investment, and the earlier you start, the better off you are, right?
Absolutely. And that kind of cycles back, to kind of the start of the show. I know this is a particular episode that maybe if you've been listening kind of seems disjointed. How do we go from, coaching to now it's down economies, and what are you doing down economies, to now community building? But if you really think about it, the underlying theme here is from start to finish, you've got to get yourself personally in a mind space and in a position to be able to effectively communicate as a salesperson or as a marketer. Then your market is always going to change. We happen to be in a down market. So then how does that coaching come into play? How do you keep your self growing? And that makes your coaching and stuff so much more important. And now we're talking about communities. And what community is all about to me is building a safe house, if you would, for downtimes. Because, if you're in the B2B space, B2B is all about relationship building. And you have to pour into those relationships, over and over and over again, because sometimes it takes a lot of nurturing, before people are going to get ready and going to make a decision to do business with you. And we don't get to control the timing of that, do we? It's more about who are they going to trust at that moment of decision. And so you can really kind of not build a barrier, or if you would, insulate yourself from some of these downtimes as you build these communities and as you improve yourself, keeping the right mindset, that you're here long term. The more you build into relationships long term, and you as a sales leader, the more you pour into your salespeople and help them understand we're looking at a long term approach here, not just what's going to happen next week. Those are all process things, right? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think sometimes, especially new leaders, if they haven't been coached, focus on outcomes, right?
Yes.
And 100%, it is about the process. And the earlier you start building and nurturing relationships, I mean, personally myself, I've nurtured relationships for as long as 7 years in healthcare, and before I've seen business, right? But some of those deals are millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
one of those things that you have to. It is a long game, and I think that um, one of the things that community can do for an organization, just to tie it back to our earlier conversation, is that community is like a slow ramp, but once you get enough people in your community, that's where you can see acceleration in your business, because you have more
Absolutely.
people talking to one another, and that's where I have seen the time to contract be reduced significantly by as much as 30%. In healthcare, we can be anywhere from 9 to 18 months, depending on the size of the organization. When we can get it down to 6 months, I call that a huge win. Um, I've also noticed that, the multi-threading aspect of a deal, when I have more trust, that instead of having as many as 15 to 20 people involved in the contracting process, sometimes that has dropped down to 5 because I've earned their trust. So those are just a few examples that I have seen specifically, that can really help. And like I said, it takes time to build those. And in the meantime, so what are you doing with your team to ensure that they're continually upskilling, have that growth mindset, and continue to invest and don't burn any relationships, right? continue to add value, nurture, and be very cognizant and empathetic of meeting the customer or prospective buyer where they're at, period.
That is an awesome bow on the conversation. Thank you, Randi. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope everybody that has been listening has gained tremendous value. Randi, I appreciate you taking your time to do this for us and the fantastic information that you delivered.
Thank you so much for having me, Monte.